All right, what's up, people? Welcome to Arizona StuMo. If you haven't met me yet, my name is Jake Welchans, and I'm really excited you're here. Guys, I actually had the privilege of starting Arizona StuMo back in 2018, and so at our first event ever, we had one person. And so seeing it grow to this, seeing it grow to these influencers, leaders in this room right now, guys, it's incredible for me. And I'm just excited to speak to you guys tonight. If you're in this room, just know you're in a room of influencers, leaders, people trying to make a difference on this campus. And I'm so proud of you for being here tonight, because what that means to me is that you're committed to growing and changing and becoming better. And so welcome to late night. I'm excited you're here. And so if you spend any time around me, you're going to get to know my fam. Here's the fam right here, okay? So that's my wife, Rose, right there. We got my oldest son, Conrad. He's a stud. He just started flag football, 8Us. They've been getting demolished, but we're getting better. And then I got 3 little girls. And so at first, if you would have asked me, do you want to be a boy dad, girl dad, I would have said boys. But, man, I love having the girls. Man, they make my life so much better. And so we do a lot of things together as a family, and one of the most recent things we've done together is a trunk or treat. And so here's a picture of us at trunk or treat right here. We decided to do Jurassic Park, just throwback, go for the old 90s movie. And it was great, except my girls, they didn't really want to do what we were doing. And so if you know my 2 oldest girls, Edie and Roxy, you'll know that they love being authentic. They're authentic girls. They want to stick to themselves. And so I asked them, I was like, hey, what do you guys want to be for Halloween? And like 6 months ago, before we did anything else, they just decided they wanted to be trash pandas. Okay, trash pandas. So you're probably thinking to yourself, what's a trash panda? It's pretty simple. It's a raccoon that lives in a trash can. And so they decided, hey, we want to be trash pandas. And I was like, okay, I don't even know where this idea came from. But they came up with this whole scheme that at the trunk or treat, basically what they were going to do is we were going to have 2 metal trash cans on like right next to Jurassic Park. And people were going to come like innocently, come up to the trash can, try to throw some trash in there. They just pop out, like hiss at the people, and then hand them candy. And they did it. Here's a picture of them right here. Man, they were dominating. Like people were going to the trash. They scared many little children that night, but they were handing out candy, like the good stuff. Really proud of them. They're authentic, and they are just so true to themselves. There's been multiple times in my life where I've wanted to be authentic. And I think one time that really sticks out to me was when I went to an SEC school, and I heard about Rush. Okay, so I was coming from out of state. I didn't know anything about Rush, and I just heard people were doing it. And then I found out like 40% of the school was going through or was in Greek life at my school. I was like, this is what I have to do. And so I was afraid. I was like, I'm an outsider. I don't want to come off as inauthentic. And so we're going through like orientation, all this different stuff, and I'm just nervous. But I met this guy in my group named Jimmy, okay? And Jimmy kind of became my comfort. We became boys. He was in my RC group, and whenever I was nervous, he'd be like, man, it's going to be all right. We're going to get into a house. You're going to have a great experience. We're going to do this together. And so I was like, man, as long as I got Jimmy with me, we're going to be good. And so the day comes, and we have our first Rush party, and we walk up to the door, and it's insane. Like, there's people pounding on the door. I don't know what's going on. People screaming inside the house. There's, like, smoke coming out from the front door of the house, and I'm like, I have no idea what to expect at this Rush party. And I'm with, like, 20 other guys, and we're brand new freshmen on campus. We're terrified. We don't know what's about to happen. And I remember Jimmy coming over to me. He's like, hey, dude, just so you know, we're in this together. And I look at him. I was like, man, that's great. It's good being here with Jimmy. And so they opened the door, they funneled us in, Jimmy went in before me, and right as he walked through the threshold of the door, boom, takes a bow to the face, breaks his nose, he's on the ground. I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. They moved Jimmy to the side, and I get pulled into this Rush party. Like, what the heck is going on? My comfort, Jimmy, was gone. Just so you know, I think Jimmy actually got a bid to the house. They wanted to avoid, like, lawsuits and stuff like that, so, it was a good strategy for getting a bid to the house. But, man, I wanted to fit in so much going into that school. I remember trying to think, man, how can I be authentic to this Rush experience? And then once you actually get into the fraternity, you decide to yourself, you're like, man, what's it actually like in a fraternity? Everyone's talking about how they have the best brotherhood, like the best stuff going on campus, all this different stuff. And you're like, what's it really going to be like on the inside? And I remember getting into my fraternity and just being like, man, this is not exactly what I expected. Just to give you guys an example, there was a guy in the house. His name was Cody. And Cody was a little bit off the rails, okay? So Cody was kind of a chill guy. He was, he would keep it pretty level most times, but then sometimes he would just do something so off the rails. You're like, man, what is wrong with Cody? Well, case in point, Cody was driving around one day. He had this old truck, and we had some rural roads around our campus. And he's driving, and he sees roadkill on the street. So normal people, they see roadkill on the street, and they're like, I'm just going to leave that. That's what we do. We drive past it. We don't do anything with it. Not Cody. Cody sees it. He goes down. He inspects it. It's a dead skunk. And he's like, okay, I'm going to throw that in the back of my truck. And so he picks up the skunk, throws it in the back of his truck, and he gets back to the house, and he's like, how am I going to maximize this roadkill that I just found? I'm like, who has that question? Well, he's thinking, like, what am I going to do with this skunk? Then he remembers our neighbor house is SAE, and we hate SAE. And I know there's SAEs here. We love you guys. We're glad you're here. But, man, we hated SAE so much at my school, and so Cody was like, man, I'm gonna put it in the house. It's going to be hilarious. Well, Cody never really just stopped at square one. And so he spends like a couple hours literally trying to break into the SAE house. Like he's just trying to break in left and right. And eventually he finds a window that's opened by the kitchen. He opens the window, the kitchen's a small window. He goes in with this dead skunk. And he's looking around, he's like, what am I going to do with this skunk? Like he's in the house now and he's got to make it count. So what does he do? He goes to the microwave. He opens the microwave. He puts the skunk in the microwave. He turns the microwave to 30 minutes. And he leaves. He gets out of the house. I mean, like later that day, there were like people in hazmat suits walking around. Like, I mean, it was like, man, they had to leave the house, evacuate SAE. It was nuts. And you're like, what's the real fraternity experience like? That was mine the first couple of weeks. I'm like, Cody, I didn't know what to expect. Man, we all want to be authentic in life. Like we want to experience life to its fullest extent, really get the most out of life. And you know what I know about you guys in this room is that you want to get the most out of your faith. Like if you're in here tonight, I know you're in here because you want to get the most out of your faith. You want to get the most out of your walk with God, and you don't want to fake it. Like deep down, no matter if like you're just looking into faith for the first time, or whether this is something you've been looking into your whole life, I know you're here because you want an authentic relationship with God. And the problem with that is that sometimes, depending on where we're at, man, it can really be up or down in terms of our relationship with God. Some of you guys are coming into this room and you're thinking, man, if I'm thinking about my relationship with God and honestly how it's going, like how it's really going in my life, I'm not that confident. I don't really know if I'm living up to God's standard. If that's you in this room tonight, I want to tell you, we have good news for you tonight. I mean, if you're like that, if you're experiencing that right now, man, this talk is for you. For most people in this room, if you're thinking about your relationship with God, for you, what it's probably feeling like is you kind of keep score of how your relationship with God's going. Like you wake up one day, you get a lot of prayer in, or you're nice to people, or you read your Bible, or you go to that Bible study, or you come to late night. And really how well you do that day determines how you feel about your relationship with God. And if that's you and you're experiencing that right now, what I want to tell you is God never meant for you to feel uncertain in your relationship with him. He wants you to authentically know him and know that every day. And some of you guys are coming in this room and you are confident in your relationship with God. And most of you that feel that way, rightfully so, man, you're making all the right decisions in your faith, man, you're impacting people, you're pouring your life out for other people. But there's another group of people in here that are way confident, and I want to tell you, maybe it's a little way too confident in your faith. And I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean as we go through this talk. You see, Jesus didn't want us to question how our relationship with God is. He wanted us to know. He wanted us to know 100%, is this legit? Is this authentic? Or is it fake? We're in this series called the G.O.A.T series where we're talking about all these incredible lessons from Jesus where he taught us some of the most important things ever taught in the history of the world. And tonight is no exception. We wanted to end it on one of the most important things that we can talk about tonight. So if you're here tonight, man, buckle up. This is going to be a great talk, and I'm excited you're here. And so we'll set the scene for what Jesus is doing here. He's talking to a big group of people, and it's just like this. There's people from all different walks of life, people having all different experiences in their walk with God, and he's going to start teaching them, how do you know if you're authentic or if you're fake? It's really interesting, but the way he starts it is even more interesting. Check out what he says first. This is what he says. He says, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. And so he's talking to this group of people, and he's saying the first thing that he mentions to these people is, hey, be aware that there are people in life that may want to deceive you in your faith, that may want to deceive you in general. He's saying, be aware that in life, not everyone has your best interest in mind, and not everyone is going to lead you down the right path. There's some people, most people don't make a living out of deceiving people, and that's a really good thing in the world. But there's some people throughout history who really have done this. Like, I'll give you guys an example. There's a guy in the world, in history, who actually did all these things. So track with me as I walk through this. He was in an NBA All-Star game. He played with the New York Yankees. He was in the U.S. Open in golf. He won an Emmy. And he also cheered with the Dallas Cowboys. Okay, that's a weird list, but this is him right here. This is Barry Bremen. And Barry Bremen did all those things. He made a living out of deceiving people and acting like a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? So he would dress up for these things, like at the Emmys, he would walk out before the person actually supposed to take the award. He took the award from the person before they could get out there. For the Yankees game, he's down there warming up with them, like taking hits, all this different stuff before people start going, who is this guy? Like, I've never seen this guy before. He's on the floor at the NBA All-Star game, just warming up, taking threes, all this different stuff. He made a living out of this. Like, he'd be huge on TikTok today, right? Like, he'd be incredible. But he was a deceiver. To make more sense of this, like imagine that you're going to the Arizona Duke game, and that's like in a week and a half. It's going to be an incredible game. You guys should all be trying to get out there. I know some of you guys are trying to get the points or whatever for that to try to get into that game. But imagine like you brought someone with you who's a close friend, and they're like, hey, I'm a diehard Arizona fan, right? And they're dressed up in the red, white, and blue. Man, they got all the gear on. They know all the players. They're telling you, man, they love Arizona Wildcats, and you guys have incredible seats, right? You're sitting there. You are right behind the bench, and the game gets going, and they just start mocking the players, right? They just start tearing into the Arizona players. Like, who is this person that I thought was on my side? When Jesus is talking about wolves in sheep's clothing, he's saying, hey, man, just be aware in life that there's sometimes people who you think have your best interest in mind, especially in terms of faith, who aren't necessarily going to lead you in the right direction. Jesus is saying there's sheep and there's wolves. And it's the nature of a wolf to deceive, sometimes even themselves. Sometimes they don't even know that they're doing it. So here's the question that begs. How do we identify these people? How do we figure out who's fake and who's real? How do we do that? Well, Jesus starts to teach exactly how to do this. And this is what he says. He says, you will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? And basically what he's saying is he starts talking about trees. You're like, why is Jesus talking about trees? Well, what Jesus is saying is that, man, every tree produces some kind of fruit, right? You don't go to a lemon tree and pick figs, right? You don't go to an apple tree and pick lemons. Like, every kind of tree is going to produce exactly the fruit that it was designed to produce. So there's lots of cool trees in Arizona, and like lots of people have cool orange trees, lemon trees, all different stuff. If you come to my house, I actually have none of that. I've got 9 mesquite trees, and they're the worst. They are absolutely the worst tree you can possibly have. And so just to give you guys a taste of them, like, they've got some shade. Like, if you know anything about mesquite, you can make great barbecue off mesquite. Like, they got a lot of good stuff going for them. But then the things you don't know about mesquite is they have thorns. And I'm not talking about just any kind of thorns. I'm talking about thorns like that big. And so just to give you an example, we were pulling out to go on a road trip with my family at 7 a.m. one morning. And we hit a mesquite thorn. It took our tire down. I mean, that's the kind of thorns we're talking about with mesquite trees. They got roots that go everywhere. They send pollen everywhere. But here's the deal. If you look at a mesquite tree, you know it's a mesquite tree because it's got thorns, because it's got the unique leaves, because of its roots, because of all those different things. But again, why is Jesus talking about trees? Well, he continues on. He says this, so every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So he keeps talking about trees. And the point he's trying to make about these trees is that there are good trees and there are bad trees. So again, if you're at my house, which I hope to get you guys over there to hang with us, we'd love to have you over for a meal or something like that. But if you go in my backyard, you'll see this potted plant next to our back porch. And what you'll see is this really sharp stick sticking out of this pot, right? Okay. And if you ask me what that is, I'm going to tell you that's a lemon tree. And you'll be like, no, that's not a lemon tree. That's a pointy stick that you have in your yard. Okay, so case in point, long story short, we tried to grow a lemon tree in that pot like 4 or 5 times. It's crazy. We can't get it to grow. It's not working, but it always turns into that same thing, like a sharp stick sticking out of this pot, and it's just sitting there. So imagine one day that I went up to that tree, right? And I had this like great big basket of lemons and a nail gun, right? And I went up to that stick, and I took the nail gun, and I took those lemons, and I just got lemon on there, right? Looking good. Another lemon on there. And I just decked it out with lemons, right? And I would say, hey, man, this is a beautiful, healthy lemon tree. What you would find out later on, this is not the case, right? It's not a good tree. And what the tree produces is nothing. And what Jesus is saying in the section, he's saying, hey, there's good trees and there's bad trees, and you can tell by the fruit they produce. No matter how long, eventually, at some point, you're going to realize what kind of fruit this tree is producing. And so you look at it, and you're like, okay, well, why is Jesus saying these things about trees? And then he continues on, and he says this. He says, thus you will recognize them by their fruits. And so he's making this case. He's saying, how can you tell if someone is authentic or if someone is fake in their faith? What he's saying is you can tell by their fruit. You can tell by their life. You can tell by what their life produces. Like in the short term, you may not be able to tell what kind of tree it is, but in the long term, every single time, you're going to be able to figure out what kind of tree that is. Is it a good tree? Is it the authentic, real tree? Or is it a fake? I want to give you guys some pointers here. So this is the thing, is if you're a Christian, if you're trying to follow Jesus, man, you can always tell if someone's really following Jesus by the fruit in their life. And here's how you cannot tell if someone is following Jesus. This is a telltale sign. This is what Jesus is trying to get across there. He says, you can't tell if someone's actually following God by what they wear. You can't tell if they're actually following God by the things that they know. Like if they know a bunch about the Bible, if they know a bunch about God, all those different things. You can't tell if someone's following Jesus by who they hang out with. You can't tell if someone's following Jesus by if they go to StuMo or church or all those different things. How can you tell if someone's actually following Jesus? The fruit in their life. What actually comes out of their life? How do they act around others? Are they honoring God with their decisions? What do they say? Do they obey God and his commands? Is their life changing to be more like Jesus? Jesus is telling us it's not just what someone says or what they wear or where they go. He's saying, what does their life actually produce? That's how you can tell if it's true or not. So I want us to discuss just for a second. Go ahead and pop that discussion question. What do you want to see change in your life as you try and follow Jesus? Go ahead and spend about 30 seconds to a minute discussing with the people next to you. Here's the truth about our lives, guys. I hope as you guys are authentically trying to pursue God, that this is what you're going after. Man, that your life is producing good fruit. Not that you're just saying you're one thing or behaving a certain way, but that actually out of your life is coming the stuff that authentic followers of God produce. So Jesus is looking at this crowd, and he's teaching this, and you can imagine they're kind of asking some questions. They're like, man, this is kind of a tough teaching. Like you're saying that it's not just what I say or like some prayer I made or something like that. You're saying that it's actually like you can tell if someone's authentically following Jesus by what they actually do and like the pattern of their life and all those different things. But Jesus goes even further with these people. And, you know, the thing you got to know about Jesus is he wasn't always a people pleaser. In fact, he always wanted to shoot people straight. He always wanted to tell people what was true, even if it rubbed him the wrong way. And Jesus does that right here. And he starts talking to this group of people again. And he goes even more personal with these people. And he says this. He says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father. And what he is saying right here is so controversial at the time. It's so out of the ordinary at the time that people are shocked when he says it. And what he's saying there is it's not enough to know about Jesus if you want to enter heaven. Like if you're at the gates of heaven one day and you're sitting there going, man, like I know who Jesus is. What he's saying is it's not enough to just know about him or to say that he is your Lord if you want to enter the gates of heaven. Man, that's a tough teaching. And that's pretty intense. And you're thinking, man, is Jesus really serious about it? But if you think about it for a second, it totally makes sense. So I grew up kind of all around the country. And so I started out in Texas. I was born in Texas, in Dallas. Any Dallas people in here? Okay. We got a couple. Okay, I see. Yeah. I moved to D.C. Any D.C. people? Like Fairfax? Anything? Okay, nothing. And then we moved to St. Louis. And so in D.C., what was really cool is in D.C., I got some incredible experiences. So we moved there from Texas. And there was this thing. You used to be able to actually tour the White House. So today you can't tour the White House. Obviously, after like 9/11, things changed. There's a lot more security. But you could tour the White House. So I, as a little kid, got to tour the White House. And I actually got to set my foot in the Oval Office, okay? So there's like a line here. I didn't actually like go in the Oval Office, but I did one of these like, toe taps so I could say that I'd been in the Oval Office before. And here's the thing about the White House. I know the presidents, right? So I know Donald Trump. And I know Joe Biden, right? One is the future president, one is the current president. I've seen them on TV. I talk to them with friends. I talk about them with friends. I know a lot about their personal lives. I voted in their elections. Man, I know a lot about these people. Now, imagine that I show up at the gates of the White House, right? Just me, Jake, middle-aged Jake, right? Walking up to the White House. And I knock on the gate. I don't even know what it looks like, but I'm like, hey, I'm here to see Joe Biden. Can you let me in? What are they going to say? No, absolutely not. That's crazy. They'd be like, what, who are you? Why should we let you in? And what if I looked at him and I was like, hey, I know about Joe Biden. Like, I follow the news. Like, I even know he was a senator, all that stuff. Like, let me in. Like, I want to go and spend time in there. And they look at me and they're like, you're crazy. What are you talking about? You don't know Joe Biden. You don't know this. We can't let you in here. What Jesus is saying in this passage right here is he's saying it's not enough to just live a life where you say, I know Jesus, or I'm a Christian, or I go to church, or I'm in that Bible study. He's saying it's not enough. That's tough. But the crazy thing is, what happens next is even more surprising. He's talking to these people in heaven, right? This hypothetical situation where people are at the gates of heaven, and they're saying, hey, I want to get in. And these people hear Jesus say, it's not enough to just say you know who I am. But they start arguing with him. And it continues on, and this is what it says. It says, on that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do many mighty works in your name? And they just start arguing with him. They're like, Jesus, what do you mean I can't get in? Like, look at the list of things that I've done. Like, look at this. Like, I've prophesied in your name. I've cast out demons. I've done many mighty works in your name. And they just pull out their resume, right? And they're like, Jesus, clearly I'm qualified to be here. Let me in. We're at the University of Arizona. One thing I love about the University of Arizona is we love resumes here. Like, it is a resume university, man. Everyone is building the resume, and that's why I love this room so much, man. You guys are grinding. You guys are working hard. You're not just sitting back, like, relaxing. You're trying to make the most out of your college experience. But just imagine with me, like, you're that person at the gates of heaven, and you're, like, looking at Jesus, and he's saying, hey, it's not enough to know my name, and you just pull out the resume, right? The solid Eller resume. It's got perfect formatting. You got like 4 people to look over it. You got all the questions down. He's going to ask you everything like that. And you just start listing off your resume, right? And maybe it sounds like this. It sounds like, I go to church 1 to 2 times per month, maybe. That's good. I go to late nights most weeks. I've really cut back on the substances. I'm clearly doing better than the people around me. I'm a Wall Street scholar. I'm in DSP, Greek life, commercial real estate, and StuMo. I do community service. I'm a good person. I'm generally nice to people. I pray most days, and I generally do the right thing. Let me in. That's a good list. We all look at that list and we're like, man, that person is crushing it, right? These people are bringing the resume to Jesus. And what does he say? Like, they're arguing with him. What's he respond? How does he respond? This is what he says. He says, and then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. That's scary stuff. They have the perfect resume. How could he not let them in? He says, go. Even in the midst of all that good, he says, leave. And why? Why does he tell them to leave? It's because he didn't know them. You see, they knew Jesus. They could tell you all about him. They had spent a lot of their life like trying to do good things that he had talked about. But Jesus didn't know them. I think about my life, like growing up and like trying to grow in my faith. And so I grew up in and out of church. I wouldn't say I was the person who knew the most. I didn't know the least, but we didn't grow up in church a ton. And so I spent most of my life kind of having this idea about God that I had to perform, right, to be accepted by God. And so it kind of looked like this. Like I would go throughout the week and like I would have a bad week, but I'd be like, God, this week I'm going to turn it around. Man, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to, pray this much. I'm going to stop doing these things. And I lived a life where my whole life I was totally uncertain about my relationship with God, if it was authentic or not. And then I got to college. And by God's grace, there were two guys in my fraternity who sat me down. And I told this story a while back. And when they sat me down, they explained to me that that's not what Jesus wanted at all. You see, Jesus came to this earth to live a perfect life, right? He was the Son of God. He's fully God. He was fully man. He lived a perfect life, never sinned once. He was doing miracles, healing people, and they killed him, and they put him on a cross. And the important part about that was that when Jesus died on that cross, what he did was he paid for the sins that I was committing, the times where I was failing, the times where I could not get it right, the times where I kept failing, where I was choosing to not follow him. He paid for that so that I could have a relationship with him. And he came back to life, proving that he was God and that what he said was true. You see, Jesus doesn't want your resume. He doesn't want your good works. He doesn't want you to talk about how you know him. He wants you to have a deep relationship with him where you're living for him, not because you feel compelled to, not because you feel like it's the right thing to do, but because you love him for what he did for you. Isn't that so much different? It's not a confession that gets you that relationship with Jesus where he knows you. It's not your works. The only thing that gets you that relationship with Jesus is him knowing you and you being known by him. And that's through faith. I mean, that's through deciding to turn from our sin and trust in Jesus and say, hey, my life, it's yours. I'm not going to keep trying to micromanage it, to build my resume, to get it better so that I can earn my way to heaven. I'm going to say, hey, my life, yours. You have it. And from that point on, by faith, he knows you. That's the important thing in life. It's not how much you know about Jesus. It's that he knows you. So what do we do? How do we respond to this idea that, man, the most important thing in life is being known by Jesus, not like the good things we're doing or trying to earn our way to heaven? What do we do? Well, the great thing about the Bible is it gives us really clear applications that we can follow, man, to know what to do. And one of the great passages that teaches us what to do is this right here. And this is what it says. It says, examine yourselves to see whether you are in the faith. Test yourselves. Or do you not realize this about yourselves, that Jesus Christ is in you, unless indeed you fail to meet the test? What are we meant to do to respond to this truth that Jesus has given us? He wants us to examine our lives. That's what he wants, to examine our lives. And here's the crazy thing about examining your life is that where most people get this wrong is actually when they get this idea, they start going, okay, I'm going to examine my life. And what they do is they start looking around at all the people around them, and they start going, okay, this person's living this way. Okay, this is kind of the standard over here. Okay, this guy, he does this, and this one doesn't do that. They start looking at all the people around him, and they say, okay, well, as long as I'm like a step above those people, I'm fine. The crazy thing about that verse is that what Jesus is saying is that no one else can examine your life but you. You're the only one that can look at your life and see, does my life actually have the fruit that Jesus wants me to live out? The crazy thing about that is only you can do it. And it doesn't matter. All these things All these things that we go through in life, they don't matter as much as we think they do. It doesn't matter if you went through confirmation or if you were baptized or said a prayer or if you go to church. Those are really good things. Don't get me wrong. Those are great things to do. But that's not what gets you a relationship with Jesus. He wants you to examine your life. Look at your life. Look and actually ask the question, do I really have a relationship with him? Does my love for Jesus dictate what I do day in, day out? Is there fruit in my life that people can see that I'm actually following Jesus? Does your life look like you love him enough to change anything to follow him? Does your life change over time to represent that you really are a follower of Jesus? He wants you to examine yourself. Examine your life. No one can do it for you. No one can answer that question, is this person following God or not? Only you can answer that question. And so what I want to do tonight is, man, you guys did the hard work of getting here, okay? You guys spent special, crucial time in the middle of school to be here for 30 minutes. And what I want to do is I just want to take 1 minute. And what I want us to do in this room is I just want you to pull out your phone, man, get out your notes app, and I just want you to examine your life and ask those questions. Man, am I actually following Jesus? And just write down some notes on what you actually see about your life. So go ahead and pull out your phone for 30 seconds to a minute. We're going to do this, and I'll come back up. Man, hopefully you got some time to just examine your life and think through, man, does my life show the fruit that I want it to show in terms of my relationship with God? Is it authentic or is it something fake? So I'll end with this, guys. So I generally over the years, I've tried different fitness programs, different diets, stuff like that. And so, I've gotten through these different stages in my life. And, most of those diets, center on me just, losing a ton of weight, being, super lean, all that different stuff. So I've done, some crazy things to, try to achieve that. And, I think this year is the first year in my life that I've just kind of come to the realization that I am firmly dad bod. That's what I'm going to be for the rest of my life. And yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah. I guess you can clap if you want for that. I'm dad bod, right? And so, and I've realized that if I want to maximize the dad bod, I need the strong dad bod. Not like the, the one that's never working out, stuff like that. I want to take my shirt off at the pool and for people to look at me and go, yeah, that makes sense, right? I don't want them to be like, wow, look at that six pack. That's incredible. Man, that guy, if I had a six-pack, people would be a little concerned. They'd be like, man, that's kind of weird. I don't know if he should have that. So I'm firmly in dad bod mode, but I'm going for strong dad bod, right? I'm trying to hit the max, working out, lifting the weights, all that different stuff. I put aside all the sissy stuff, the cycling, the running, all the triathlon stuff. But man, in all seriousness, I'm happier that way. I love living that way. That fits my body type more. I enjoy it more. And what I'm finding through that is that, man, it's more authentic. That's who I am. In my DNA, I'm meant to be that person. When we're talking about faith, how many of us are struggling with our faith because we've missed the true, authentic meaning of having faith with Jesus? Imagine waking up and knowing that your faith and your relationship with God, it's authentic. It's real. It's not something that you have to worry about. It's not something that you have to think about. It's not something that you have to be like, man, am I good enough for this? You can have that kind of walk with God, but we have to examine ourselves. So what I want to challenge us tonight is this. I want to leave you with this challenge. Let's stop hiding behind our resume of good works. Man, let's trust Jesus fully with our lives so that we can have an authentic relationship with him. Let's give him everything. And let's wake up knowing that we have that real relationship. Thanks.